That's all good. Hey, everybody. This is James P. Wagner here with Local Gems Press. I'm here with Nick Hale.
Hey everybody. Hey James.
How's it going? And you're here at the Publisher Speakeasy, which is just a little thing that we're doing. Hush, hush, don't tell anybody. Where people are going to ask the publishers questions about kind of what goes on behind the scenes, what our thoughts are on various things. All that stuff about publishing that doesn't get out there very much unless we're at a live event and people are asking us questions. So people have sent in questions and we're just going to be answering them and just kind of giving our thoughts on that. But again, shh, don't tell anybody. Uh, so one question that we got here that this is something I could basically talk about for a long time, and that's how has the internet changed publishing?
That's a huge question.
Yeah, but basically it's sort of it's completely changed publishing, but at the same time, it kind of hasn't changed it as much as people sort of think it has. In a way, it's sort of like kind of given it a more, technologically advanced version of sort of bringing it back to a little bit more kind of what it was a couple hundred years ago in a weird way, as counterintuitive as that kind of says, because in the 20th century you had very big dividing lines between traditional publishers and small presses and self-publishing, largely because of the price tag that was associated with it. You had if you wanted to put a title, you needed like $10,000 up front basically to get like 1,000 copies printed and then send it to a distributor that would get into all those bookstores. Not everybody can really kind of afford to do that, but with the internet, kind of print on demand and smaller print runs has made it much more possible for indie authors and stuff to kind of actually basically get their stuff out there without needing to throw $10,000 at it or something like that. That's one way that it did it.
Yeah, in the same time, in the 20th century, as technology uh, and rapid transportation made and mass communication made it a lot easier to broadcast a book from one place to all over the world. So it gave higher distribution. The internet took that and turned it up to 11, because not only do you have instant communication all over the world in multiple forms, but you can send a digital copy of that book all over the world in many forms. So, in addition
Yeah.
to the availability of tools to get published, the availability of tools to everybody to sell and distribute have increased.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think a lot of people kind of, now we kind of take it for granted, even though we've only had it for so many years at this point. But because really, like even a video like this, for example, that we're putting up, on our YouTube channel for free or whatever, that could go to like, we can click a button and send this to like 25,000 people on our email list. It's like if we wanted to take, a video like this and send it out to 1,000 people, 20 years ago, it's like just the amount of stuff you'd have to do that. It's like you would have to
Yeah, really.
get you'd have to record it. You would have to like rather than just doing it from a computer here, you need like the professional recording equipment. You need to make like if you're going back to VHSs, you need to make like a master file with that and then get the copies made. Even with DVDs, because like video, like large videos didn't really go out there until like 2007. So before that it was just short videos. So in terms of that, it's like now you can click a button, and just thinking about how much that would cost you to get each one made and then actually ship it to all those people. Like nowadays with a click of a button, you can send like a video like this out there, pretty much just for a few bucks a month with like an email client. And so, coming at that point of view from like, publishing with like ebooks and things like that, it's like if I wanted to give, everybody on like a traditional mailing list, a poetry prompt journal, for example, back then it's like we'd have to get them all printed and put them in envelopes and stamp them and send them all out. It'd probably take a team of like a dozen people to actually do that to everybody on a physical mailing address. Now again we can put it up on a website, people can download it for free, and even if they want they could just actually print it out there, fold it over and have a physical copy right there. So it's certainly opened up a lot of avenues with that, where things that would have taken teams of people to do like 20 years ago or even 15 years ago, now it's like you could do it way easier.
Yeah, and even things like, well, advertising. I mean, you know, back 20 years ago, and as a quick aside, if like I get sick of people saying I'm so old because I hear a lot of 20 somethings, late 20 somethings say that. But we're old, man. The internet's not new. The internet's been around for how long now? But
Yeah.
it's funny that it still feels new to us because we grew up in a time, when you didn't really have it.
I mean, well, technically speaking, the thing's been around since the '60s. It's just, in the
Yeah,
'90s, you
true.
started being more available to the public. But
Yeah.
it's more just like, because I remember when we were like, in high school and the internet, it was like readily there, but there was so much less on it. B, it was so much more of an effort to get stuff up on it, because like
Yeah.
a lot of social media didn't exist. You had forums and stuff like that. So
Well, you
it's
had to
just
know
like,
code.
yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
you either need to know code or there was a limited number of websites you could put your stuff on. Nowadays there's so many websites that take care of all that for you. You could just put your stuff up. Like anybody can have a blog, anybody can have, and you could have a blog that has a lot of followers too, which is like, that's one way that it really changed the publishing industry because, up until not that long ago, there was like this idea that like, print, whether it was, books or like a magazine, print was king. It was like that was the legitimate stuff because somebody put a lot of effort into doing that, and it was like, here you go. And e-magazines, and stuff like that, like they were, just not to be taken seriously. And while, I still say that there's a larger element of truth to that still, because the internet does make it easy for literally anybody to just be like, I have an e-magazine right now, and like, the only people who are reading it is my mom, but I have an e-magazine right now.
Well, you got to
There's
start
also,
somewhere.
well, yeah, right. One reader's better than no readers, right?
Every little
But
bit helps.
thanks, Marv. But yeah, it's like, there's blogs nowadays, there's, author websites where you could have like an emag that's literally like a WordPress blog, which is like some of the frills paid for around it, that could have hundreds of thousands or even millions of readers, or whatever. And so it's like, at that point, what would you rather? Would you rather be in like, the literary magazine that gets like, that has like 200 people reading it on a subscription basis, or would you rather the readership like in the millions? So there's ways
Yeah.
online where it's like it's more about the audience numbers and the readership than really the medium at this point.
Well, yeah, but it's also, and back to the point I was making before I interrupted myself. You have, it's not just access to the media itself, it's access to advertising to get it out there. You used to have to, it used to be much more difficult, not just to spread the word, but to get paid advertising. And now any old idiot can get paid advertising as long as they have a credit card.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Um,
like if you're on Facebook, for example, you have a Facebook page, which I know some people think that a Facebook page is the start of a business. It's technically not, but it's but if you have that, you could boost a post to people interested in what it is you're posting. You can do it as little as like $10, $20 or whatever. That might not get you very far, but it's a start. It'll get you to people who wouldn't have seen it other way. I mean, and even like the way that we do things, where we're we do our anthologies all up and down the East Coast essentially. A lot of the first base of people we get in some of those, like, yeah, I mean, through other anthologies, we might have like kind of a boots on the ground to start here, but we get a lot of new people in there from, just well placed ads that we post to specific areas. So technology has really helped with that. Like in the old days, it's like you'd have to, possibly go to that area, connect with like local publications, maybe get like little business card ads on like diner menus or something like that to do it in an area. Now you could really do a lot of stuff, remotely. So that's another way that has kind of done it with the advertising. Um, I think on the other hand, though, it's thrown such a huge monkey wrench into it that a lot of people are having a hard time. Like they're having lag with the information and kind of catching up to like what's going on because it used to be pretty obvious what the difference was between like the legitimate publications and the scams used to be, and like nowadays there's a lot more. Yeah, the waters are a lot more muddy because there's a lot of things that like people might be doing now that maybe it is legitimate, but when it used to be like something that was like a red flag, and then there's a lot of things now that might look legitimate and it's not setting up red flags, but they're completely and utterly scams. So there's I think that's kind of confused a lot of people too, because there's so many different ways to do things now. And there's also so many more presses than there used to be, thanks to the ease of access that technology kind of made. So that's kind of it's an advantage, but it also has some disadvantages in the fact that there's a lot more to kind of wade through.
well, that's the dark side of that distribution and that advertising. Is a lot easier for scammers to operate
Mm-hmm.
because, once if you're advertising in a specific, or if you're scamming in a specific area, once people catch on to you, you're pretty much done.
Yeah.
But the internet gives you an endless supply of suckers to prey on. So, um, a lot of, and it's also the internet makes it a lot easier to look legitimate. Like anyone with a credit card can have a respectable, nice looking website that looks like the start of a good business, or a Facebook page that looks like the start of a good business, and professional looking printing, and can come up with like, I could go to Vistaprint right now and get a whole bunch of brochures printed up for a fake company that I just made up
Yeah.
and scam people out of money. And I'm not saying this because I'm going to do it, but this is the kind of thing that enables people to act poorly.
Yeah, I mean, you could go to
So,
Vistaprint, you could get brochures for those green raffle tickets at all our events, that you always like to sell.
hey, the
Yeah,
green raffle tickets are a great deal.
yeah. For
5 for
those who
$6.
for those unfamiliar with that, a lot of our book launch events where we do raffles, usually there's blue tickets or sometimes white tickets. He's always on the side selling, oh, I got these green tickets, or these red tickets are the ones that don't listen to him on that regard. No, but yeah, no, it is, those tools can be used by anybody. That's kind of like the sad part with technology evolving. But I mean, just simple things though, like people, not kind of understanding like what a vanity press is versus like a hybrid press, or like a small press things or whatever, because like the hybrid model, which I mean, I'm not too much a fan of it, but for some people it works, which is where like the publisher pays half of the printing and then you pay half the printing, and so it's kind of like you're sort of self-publishing but traditional publishing. I mean, that's not my cup of tea, but I wouldn't call that a scam either, because it's like they're telling you up front what it is they do, and if you kind of go with that, that's that. But that's a lot different than like something like Poetry.com, where it's like they take everything everybody sends in, and then we'll sell you the book for $50, but that's the only way you get in.
Oh,
That's like a whole different thing.
Poetry.com was even more insidious, man. I remember that. So, because it was a website you just post your poetry on, and then they'll send you a letter with your poem on the front of the letter, so it's invisible in the mail. And congratulations, you've been chosen to be in this anthology. You have to buy a copy, and it's $50 a copy. And
Mm-hmm.
if you buy a copy, you'll get in it. And I remember because we were both in high school when we both did this, and I know you know this story, but
Yep.
getting that letter with my poem, and my parents didn't know I wrote poetry at the time, so getting that letter with the poem on it and having them read it was like as a teenager, one of the most mortifying things I think I had to go through, because this is like the last thing I wanted them to see. And it wasn't even like I just posted garbage on there, stuff that I wasn't particularly proud of.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't even like good poetry that I was proud of. It was they were improving.
Yeah, I had the opposite experience. When I got that, I ran and showed my parents, like, oh, look, someone wants to publish me. And then I convinced them to buy a copy of the book, so it got in
Oh,
there.
all right,
Yeah.
that's right. You have one of
Yeah, I
those.
have one of those things. And this thing, it was like, it was one of those huge freaking, like, like textbook sized, workbook things, but it was like this thick. And the pages inside were like that cheap, like Bible reproduction thin paper that like could be easily, and there was like 20 poems on every page, because they were like literally like size like 8 or 9 font, so you could barely see it. It literally was like just a dumping ground for as many poems as they could get in there. I shudder to think how much money they made off of
I should do the
publishing.
math one day.
Yeah, no, it was like, yeah, I should. I think there's actually, I think I still know where a copy of that actually is, way back at my parents' house, so I could, go actually look at it or whatever. But yeah, so there's scams, like that. And then there was like, in the early days of, the internet with that, there was these, a lot of like printing services, which weren't, I guess they technically weren't scams, but they were like a second cousin to a scam, because they were kind of putting these ideas in your head. It was like, oh, for $5,000, we'll print you like 1,000 copies of your book, 500 bookmarks, 600 brochures, 10,000 postcards, or like, it's all this, a T-shirt, all this stuff, and then they list like, oh, and you keep like the movie rights and distribution rights and all that. Like, they're just like, so it's like, it's a printing service. They're giving you a bunch of stuff, but it's like they're kind of just playing on like the not knowing, angle of it, and the fact that so I wouldn't necessarily call it a scam, but it's definitely predatory.
It definitely rides the line, and a lot of those they'll upsell you like crazy, and if you don't pay the balance in full, they won't actually print anything.
Yeah.
So I actually have a friend who got involved in one of those where I think she was in debt to them for like $6,000 that she didn't have, and she had paid I think like 1,000 up front, and they refused to do any work on her book until she paid all that money.
Yeah, no, that,
And
that that type of stuff is ridiculous, especially because
yeah,
with technology now, there's no need for, unless you want them, there's no need for print runs that huge, if you don't need them, because that was the thing. They just cared about selling as many copies to people as they could, and then like 97% of them would sit in your garage for 20 years, because it's like you're thinking, oh, look at all these that I have, but then it was just on them to sell them. But like, with print on demand printers and things like that, and even if you're not using something like, Kindle or Lulu or something like that, even like with local print shops who've kind of gone with the trend of print on demand, it's like you can, if you're going to have an event for a book, it's like you can get 100 copies, for that event because like, oh, 87 people are going to be there or something. And then if you have like a dozen left over, you have a dozen left over. It's not like it's going to take you years to move them. And then if you happen to have like a really big audience and you're going to have an event of like 300-400 people, you can order 300-400 copies for that. Or if you're planning a whole tour, you can get the number that you need. You can either order as few as like 10, 20, 25, or you could order 1,000 depending on that. So but it's really helpful though for people because it's not that huge of a financial risk to do it like it used to be. Because again, if you needed to put 1,000 copies at a distributor just to get it into a store, you're looking at $5,000-$10,000 investment up front. So technology has really kind of helped it with that. But it's also that's kind of like a throwback to the days of Ben Franklin's printing shop or Walt Whitman or whatever, because where the only dividing line really between the publisher and the printer was who's going to pay the bill, because there was no shortage of people who went into those shops and would with their own money commission this many books to be made, and then at the same time they'd make a deal with like Ben Franklin to sell books on consignment right at his bookshop right next door to the printer, because usually that was how it goes. The printers were usually also booksellers. Like I know there's one story about Benedict Arnold, who on both sides of the thing, like when he was under like that trial by the Continental Congress for, I don't remember what it was specifically, but he was on trial for something like some kind of like war crime or something. And then when he got exonerated from that, he paid like 10,000 British pounds or something to print like thousands of copies of this thing just to get it everywhere to let it prove his innocence. And then when he switched to the British side, he printed a manifesto of why he switched and spent thousands of pounds doing that to send it out there. He went like bankrupt just to print these freaking things from doing that. But
that sounds like he scammed himself.
Well, yeah, kind of. He was very very concerned about his public image in both cases. And then like Walt Whitman, where he released 17 editions of Leaves of Grass because he kept updating it, but he would just go in and pay for it himself. And then on the other hand, you had like with Ben Franklin, like with the Reverend George Whitefield, who was like really popular at the time, and he never had any books. So Ben Franklin's like, oh, I'll be your publisher. So he paid for a printing of like a whole bunch of his journals and sermons, out of his own pocket to actually, get them sold because, he knew they would sell. So that was really the main difference back then, was who was footing the bill for the printing. The 20th century made that line much bigger. But, the internet is kind of almost sort of taken us back to before, with the new technology. So it's kind of funny how that kind of works sometimes.
Yeah. And getting on the topic of scams again, I think you have some people who fall for all these scams, but I also think you have some people who are maybe a little oversensitive when it comes to scams. I mean, I know it because some of the things people say, it's like, I ordered this 2 weeks ago and it hasn't arrived yet. This is a scam. So people like to throw the word scam around when it's not appropriate, but also people are used to the way things used to be done or the way things are done now. So, for example, the concept of a vanity press, a press that's going to require you to pay money to be published by them, versus a press that's just very, very loose with their acceptances and they'll take almost anyone. Yeah. One could be considered a scam, even though I would say that's one of those that rides the line, and the other is just really, really accepting. And so it's unfair to accuse somebody, a press like that, of being a vanity press, but it's also unfair to accuse them of being a scam. Or another example would be, and this is something that used to be a lot more ubiquitous, by the way, reading fees. Right? I don't like reading fees. James, I know you don't like reading fees.
Nah, I don't like them
either. I don't like it when I'm submitting to places. I will avoid somewhere if I have to pay money up front, even if they give me a contributor's copy. I'm like, no, I just don't want to do it. And I understand the mindset behind it, and I don't like doing it in a publication, but it's not a scam.
No.
Not automatically.
Yeah. I know. Well, there's also like contests out there that'll charge you like, $10 to read your poem, and there's no prize. Like I consider that basically a scam.
That's
because if like it's not a bad, it's not necessarily a bad thing if something's going to charge an upfront fee, but you're supposed to get something out of it, or at least have the possibility of getting something out of it. Like, again, like either a contributor's copy, or if it's a contest, then the prize should be at least 10 times, what the reading, the entry fee is, at the very
Actually,
least.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
I don't think it's a scam. I think it's a ripoff. And I think there's a difference between the two. Like a scam is actually trying to trick you. But a ripoff,
Yeah,
you know what you're getting into.
that's a good point. Yeah.
So,
I know, but then there's people like, oh, the copy got lost in the mail. This is a scam. It's like, yes, because the best way to do a scam is to spend months making the whole publication and then just not send the thing afterwards. It's like things
yeah,
happen like that or whatever.
have pictures of the launch event with 30 people gathered around holding copies of the book.
Yeah, that too. But I mean, then again, there have been publishers in recent years, or publishers, I say, who they basically just went around collecting poems from as many people as they could, throwing them into series after series of books, and all they cared about was only selling copies of the books to everybody in the book. They never had launch events. They never had a book tour. They never even thought about the idea of trying to market it on an email list or in physical locations. Like it was just literally, now is that a scam? It's like it definitely borders the line. I mean, it's definitely, ripoff in a way, because that's all they're doing. It's dishonest and it's predatory on the people's ideas of getting published. The same time, if you know what you're getting into and you're just using it for a publishing credit, maybe it's useful to somebody, but I would stay away from that, in that case. But that's just me.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
definitely.
but yeah, so I mean, I guess just getting back to the basic question of, how has the internet changed publishing? It's really, it's made things a lot easier, sometimes a lot harder to differentiate, like between some good things and bad things. So obviously, one's going to use their judgment there. It's brought back some kind of older practices, but in a new way. And I mean, we're talking it also from the point of view of like poetry in particular, but in other areas it's like really changed things from top to bottom. Like for example, before the internet was really prevalent, short stories were kind of a dying thing, because there was a lot of the print costs were rising for a lot of magazines. There weren't as many. There were local or journals and stuff like that. And all the mainstream publishers were interested in getting the novel out of fiction writers, because that was like their model for making money. So they didn't really care about short story collections, and there were fewer places for short story writers to actually go. But the internet, brought in the ebook, and so now somebody could upload an ebook for 99 cents that's just a short story, and they could build a following that way, or they could do it in a lot of e-magazines or free on their website, build a following, and then a couple years later come out with their short story collection, and then do that in print and an ebook, and do a lot of stuff with that. So it's kind of opened areas like that in a lot of ways that you didn't have before.
I would argue that publishers are still just as interested in the novel as they were
Yeah.
pre-internet. In
Yeah.
fact, they're more so because the whole model now is novel to movie or novel to TV series.
That's
And
true.
and so they're looking for things that they can turn into something else that they can market.
Yeah.
But I would argue that readers are looking for short stories more.
Yeah. Well, because a lot of people, like the ebook scared a lot of publishers for a long time. I really wish I could have bet a lot of money on that, as I tell people a lot, that books weren't going anywhere. By the way, bookstore owner here. By the way, I've got stuff in here that's been in the store that's been around since before the Civil War. So you think about that. This book was made before we had a bathroom. Pretty much in your house. So and you can't say that anything close about an e-file. Plus, the first widely distributed ebook was a McDonald's menu, that was on their website. You could download that. Technically, was an ebook. So I never thought that ebooks were going to replace print books, but they are obviously they've added a lot. They're here to stay, and they've actually done a lot of good. Because for shorter reads, a transferable ebook is really good. It's also a great lead builder for authors to give away a chapter or a short story or a sample of their writing and kind of build a following that way, because there's a lot of stories out there of authors who they built their readership just by having a website or making an email list or an Instagram page, like that Milk and Honey story, that book or whatever, from the huge Instagram following. And then they get a book, either self-published or traditionally published, and it sells like hotcakes because they've already built the following that way. So there's a lot of these new tools that are definitely open to that in ways that authors maybe didn't have those tools before the internet came along. So I think it's really it's actually print books every year actually go up in sales numbers. Ebooks kind of fluctuate in terms of the sales. But there's also free ebooks that are out there that kind of skew that. So there's a whole lot of them circulating. So nobody really knows that number. But yeah, it's added like tons of things in that regard.
Yeah, and going back to short stories, an ebook is a great way to serialize a longer piece. So if you have, a novel that you're writing and you have a short piece of it, a good example, I know this wasn't really put out as an ebook, but Stephen King's Dark Tower series actually started as a short story.
Mhm.
The Gunslinger book started as a short story, and he just expanded it from there. Um, but if you have pieces of it, like maybe the start of something that could build into a novel, you put it out there as a short story, as a free ebook, and it gets interest, people are going to start salivating for more. And that's when once you get those people who are really interested, who have had that piece of it, a sample of it, you're going to have a really loyal audience. So
Yeah, and I've seen people get really creative with things like that. Like there was this one author who was on basically they had their own, website. The website didn't even look that good. I think it was just like an update from like a WordPress thing, but they were constantly writing chapters of their stories, and they had, it was, fantasy. So they had these characters, but then they would go on something like DeviantArt and they'd commission like artwork of their characters, getting it posted that way, and always post a link back to their website to like find out more about these characters or whatever. And so you'd have the art that was kind of bringing attention to it. You'd have the writing that was bringing attention to it. So after like a few years, when they finally had like, book one of the story done and they put it up, they sold like a couple thousand copies just because there were people who were
that's
kind of
great.
waiting for it after all those years. So it's like you know, there's no shortage of ways to kind of do that these days, thanks to the internet. So, it's kind of thrown a real monkey wrench in the model of traditional publishing. A lot of a lot of big publishing houses with like the huge warehouses and the, thousands of copies and stuff, like they've been hurting in a lot of cases too. But it's also kind of brought back, the small press and, the niche market and things like that. And so it's actually made a lot more opportunities for people to actually do things at the same time. So
Yeah, I mean, remember Borders?
yeah, but to be fair,
So
part of the reason they went out of business was because their CEO invested like nearly $1 billion in like, a food service delivery thing that nobody wanted at the time. They were like, 15 years too early if they waited for
yeah, really.
DoorDash, So that was part of it, and then also the large amounts of money that both them and Barnes and Noble, stuffed into, like the Kubi and the Nook, or their e-readers essentially.
Yeah.
Not really getting. See, Amazon was smart. The first e-reader was a novelty. It sold well. The second one didn't sell well, but then converting it into like, oh, it's a general purpose tablet now. It's like you can watch video and music and all that stuff. They kind of that's why they're still popular, because you could do everything with it. But now you could also read an ebook on your freaking phone with the Kindle app, so you don't even need that. Um, so yeah, well, I think we've gone on quite a while on this one question. So that's pretty much it for this video for right now. Hopefully we answered it to the person's satisfaction. If you're listening and you have questions you want us to answer here in the speakeasy, but don't tell anybody, we'll give you a link below to where you can email it, or send us a form or whatever and send in your questions, and hopefully we'll answer them. Again, and also in the description there should be a link. Download 90 free poetry prompts, if that's something you do. Again, ebook, for free, the ability to send stuff out there. Like I said, I'm James.
And I'm Nick.
Yep, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.